We have a new name for the coronavirus. The World Health Organization has officially called it COVID-19.
Now, a short time ago, the World Health Organization declared the outbreak an international public health emergency.
It will be the worst day this year, but the worst day for many years.
You have no right not to be vaccinated. You have no right not to wear a mask. You have no right to open up your business.
The United States surpassing 5 million confirmed cases of COVID-19.
Protests turned destructive in downtown Seattle.
Violent protests erupted early this morning.
Of another night of protests.
When someone lit a Seattle police cruiser on fire.
It is a man-made virus.
But Facebook still doesn't want you to know that. So Facebook suppressed the video. Twitter suspended Dr. Yang's account entirely.
The Chinese whistleblower doctor who told the world about the coronavirus in Wuhan has died.
In the span of just a few months, our world has been turned upside down completely. Fear has been instilled into the public. Millions of people have fallen sick and died. Our civil rights have been taken away from us. Censorship is on the rise like it's never been before. And my question is why? Why is all of this happening? Why are we experiencing the world that we're experiencing today? So, a dear friend of mine, Dr. Larry Palevsky, has agreed to stand up and share his truth, share the scientifically backed truth of what's really going on here, how a virus really works, and what a virus truly is. Truths that we're not used to hearing on the mainstream media with the narrative that's been being fed to us. Larry has been my doctor ever since I've been a little kid, and he's my family's doctor as well. Beyond that, he's a world-renowned doctor for the incredible work that he does. So sitting here with me today is Dr. Larry Palevsky. Larry, thank you so much for taking the time out to speak with us, to share this truth that the world needs to hear. Can you tell us a little bit more about who you are and what you do?
Yes, my name is Dr. Lawrence Palevsky. I'm a pediatrician licensed in New York State. I was born and raised in New York, and I graduated NYU School of Medicine in 1987 and did a pediatric residency at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York that ended in 1990. And for the last 30 years since 1990, I have worked predominantly in New York City hospitals, working in inpatient wards in pediatrics, neonatal intensive care units, pediatric intensive care units, pediatric emergency rooms, pediatric clinics, newborn nurseries, and newborn delivery room. And more recently, within the last 20 years, in a private practice where I was taking care of kids using a holistic and integrative perspective on caring for them.
Larry, thank you so much again for joining us. Thank you so much for standing up and having that courage to share the truth with the world, because it's an obligation nowadays to do that. You know, you and I have had tons and tons of conversations about the current global situation, and you keep suggesting over and over again that we're not dealing with this virus in the appropriate way. So from my understanding, a virus is actually here to help us, not to hurt us. And from my understanding even further, it seems like we've labeled the friend as the enemy. Can you share with us what a virus is and how a virus actually works?
Well, it's interesting because when we were taught in medical school about viruses and bacteria, we were taught that bacteria are live organisms and that viruses are actually not live organisms. They are inert, they're dead. And what that means is that a virus in and of itself can't make another virus. And so therefore, it has no ability to replicate. It has no ability to do anything unless it's incorporated into the genetic machinery of a living organism. That living organism can be an animal, it can be a plant, it could be bacteria, and it can be humans. So in and of itself, a virus cannot hurt you unless it's embedded in the genetic machinery and something turns it on to make more of it. And we walk around moment to moment, day to day, with viruses being turned on by outside forces, by our thoughts, by our foods, by the weather, by changes in the season, by emotions, by stressors, by chemicals that we're exposed to, toxins. Those viruses are signaled by an outside force to be turned on in our genetic material. The interesting thing about it is that the human body was practically born with more than 500,000 viruses already embedded in its genetic code. So we in our society, in our culture, actually walk around believing that viruses aren't in our body until somebody who is sick gives them to us. And that's actually incorrect. What's even more interesting is that the body contains over 100 trillion bacteria, and viruses are capable of being embedded inside the bacteria as well. So when you have more than 500,000 of viruses coded within our genetics, and then you have over 100 trillion bacteria that are lining us, we have the potential to be more virus than we are human. And that's the problem, is that we're always considering that the only way to be exposed to a virus is for someone who's sick to give it to us. And we don't understand that viruses are constantly replicating inside our body, in our cells. They're constantly replicating in bacteria. We're constantly breathing in viruses through the air, and we're not sick, which means that viruses in and of themselves don't make us sick unless there are conditions within our body and conditions outside of our bodies that signal the turning on and the turning off of these viruses. There's got to be something different about this virus, and I think that there is. And the reason I think there's something different is because every one of the symptoms in a viral illness leads to an externalized expression of symptoms. Where something is being removed from the body, there's discharge of toxicity. This SARS-CoV-2 illness does not present with discharge. It does not present with classic externalization of symptoms. It presents with actually an internalization of symptoms. What we were seeing in people who were presenting with SARS-CoV-2 infection was hypoxia, loss of oxygen, organ system failure because of the loss of oxygen, difficulty breathing and coughing because of the loss of oxygen and the potential for increased clotting, loss of taste, loss of smell, neurological symptoms. And that doesn't sound like a viral illness. This doesn't present like a classic coronavirus illness. It certainly doesn't present like a classic respiratory illness. And it certainly doesn't present like any classic viral illness. And so if this is truly a virus, what kind of virus is it? Because this is not the way viruses classically behave in the human body.
You know, it's scary to think what could actually be going on over here. And on top of everything that you just said, you know, there's a whole other controversy, the mask controversy, that's not only dividing us, but it's also scaring us. The confusion for me lies upon the fact that there are some authorities that we've been told to trust that are telling us to wear masks on one hand, while on the other hand, they're telling us not to wear masks.
Experts have been wrong frequently throughout this pandemic. At one point, they told us not to wear masks. Now they tell us we must, and so on.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
You're sure of it? Because people are listening really closely to this.
Right now, people should not be walking. There's no reason to be walking around with a mask. When you're in the middle of an outbreak, wearing a mask might make people feel a little bit better, and it might even block a droplet but it's not providing the perfect protection that people think that it is. There should be universal wearing of masks. There should be, to the extent possible, social distancing.
And on top of the mask controversy, there's a whole other controversial topic regarding the contagious factor of the virus. There are some people who believe that the virus is passed from one person to the next, while others claim that environmental factors simply cause the body to react. What do you think about this?
In our medical culture and in our culture in general, it is believed that the only way to get an illness is if someone passes it to you. And when we take a step back and we look at the fact that the body has over 100 trillion organisms already lining itself, we have to ask ourselves, well, how did all those organisms get there? Because they didn't all get there from people. They got there because we breathe them in, we eat them, and they land on our skin. And what that shows is that we can be exposed to hundreds of trillions of organisms and not get sick. We can be exposed to viruses, breathe them in, eat them, and not get sick. And so we walk around thinking that we don't have any organisms in us. We have no viruses, we have no bacteria, and the only way to get them is if someone gives it to us. And the only way someone can give it to us is if they're sick. Now, all of a sudden, we've opened up a brand new understanding of, well, now people can give you viruses when they're not sick and infect you. Well, but that's been true for millennia. We always pass organisms from each other because we're breathing. We're breathing in and we're breathing out. We're always eating organisms because they're landing on our food. And then we're born with organisms. And so this idea that the only way to have an organism passed to you is from another person really is very short-sighted and limited. The exposure to the organism isn't sufficient to make us sick. And the fact that we have over 100 trillion microorganisms on our body is proof that exposure to organisms is not sufficient to make us sick. I mean, having worked as a physician in medicine for over 30 years, I've been exposed to kids who were puking and spitting and coughing and dripping mucus all over me all the time. And I rarely got sick. So we have to change our thinking to recognize that exposures to organisms do not make us sick, which means that there must be certain conditions that are allowing for someone to get sick. So microorganisms are not just subjected to us in what turns them on and turns them off. Those organisms turn themselves on and turn themselves off in response to environmental factors, foods, air quality, change of temperature, change of seasons, stress in the environment, electromagnetic radiation, emotions, psychology, war, poverty, starvation, bombs going off. Many things in the environment that microorganisms are subjected to, same way human organisms, our animals, our plants, are all subjected to the external forces around us. So a group of 20 women can live in a dorm, they can work in an office together. And after a couple of months, you'll see that they start menstruating at the same time. Not all 20, maybe 15 of them. And so the question is, did the women catch their periods from each other? And most people would laugh at that because, what do you mean, do women catch their periods from each other? Well, but they synchronized their bodies' chemistry. How did they get the same expression of symptoms at the same time every month? We don't believe that the women popped their periods out of their bodies and passed it to another person. There's something not necessarily breathed in or ingested from the women to each other that made them catch their periods at the same time. But 5 of them didn't. And so we suspect that if you're not sick with the organism, you don't have the organism. And that the only way to be exposed to the organism is if someone sick gives it to you. And then, of course, you're guaranteed to get sick because the person who's sick must be infectious and give it to you. When in fact, we see holes in that line of reasoning all the time. So we have to start embracing the understanding that we may be exposed to organisms that make us sick long before we're exposed to the people who make us sick. And there are external forces that synchronize amongst members of society that trigger the initiation of those organisms to cause illness.
You know, that example you gave about the menstrual cycle is genius, because it really gives a first-hand example that we can all understand of how something can appear to be contagious when we know that it isn't. Now, my next question for you is in regards to censorship. Censorship has been on the rise, and especially recently, doctors have been coming out and speaking out about many controversial topics. And time again, they're censored, they're arrested, they're fired.
Li Mengyan is the virologist who says she has evidence about where this pandemic actually came from.
This virus, COVID-19 SARS-CoV-2 virus, actually is not from nature. It is a man-made virus.
But Facebook still doesn't want you to know that. So Facebook suppressed the video, presumably on behalf of the Chinese government. Facebook executives made it harder for users to watch our segment. Those who found the video had to navigate a warning that the interview, quote, repeats information about COVID-19 that independent fact-checkers say is false. Instagram, which Facebook also owns, did the same thing. Twitter suspended Dr. Yang's account entirely. It did not explain why. Nor did the tech companies explain how they would know more about disease transmission than an MD, PhD virologist like Dr. Li Mengyan. Dr. Li Mengyan is not a quack. She's authored peer-reviewed papers on coronavirus transmission in both Nature magazine and The Lancet. Those are two of the most respected publications in all of science.
So the real question here is why? Why are medical doctors and health professionals around the world being censored for challenging the official narrative?
You know, it's very interesting when people start raising the idea that medical information and scientific information are being censored. I remember in early March of 2020 when a physician taking care of patients who were presenting with the SARS-CoV-2 virus, and he was seeing that the description of a viral illness didn't fit with how they were presenting and what they were needing as far as medical care, oxygen, no ventilation versus ventilation. And he spoke out in a YouTube video and it went worldwide. And there were other doctors all around the world who spoke out about it and saying, wait a second, this doesn't present like a real viral illness. There's something different about this. We need to be treating it differently than the way we're being told to treat it. And he was censored and other physicians were censored. And it made many of us in the medical community step back and say, why are we being forced to speak a narrative that isn't consistent with what we're seeing in the field, in the clinical situations? And so it raised a big question mark for a lot of people. Why would scientific information be censored? Here we have a viral illness that we're being told is a viral illness. And yet doctors around the world have been treating thousands of patients with 2 medications that treat parasites. Now, why would a drug like hydroxychloroquine and a drug like ivermectin, both of which treat parasitic infections, why would the use of those drugs in the early stages of a SARS-CoV-2 infection make patients so much better so quickly? If this is a virus, why would medications that treat parasites make patients improve? And so even asking the question is going to be censored. Somehow, we've allowed ourselves to swallow this information that a respiratory virus is now working to give us a blood disorder and clotting factors that are making people sick, when no one has really explained the mechanism by which that happens. We're just accepting, oh, it's a virus, it must be a virus. When yet, there are many other things that could explain this, including hydrogen cyanide, electromagnetic radiation, or some parasites, when inhaled or ingested, that could be leading to some of these clinical symptoms that we're seeing. The problem is that the medical community is not thinking, we're just accepting. Scientific community is not thinking, it's just accepting. We're not really talking about viruses. We're not talking about what viruses are and what they aren't, what they can and can't do. And we're also not talking about the fact that the leading physician in the NIAID, Anthony Fauci, participated in support of research on coronavirus, to do gain-of-function research on coronavirus. Not just any virus, coronavirus. What that means is that he knows, and many know, that the virus is a benign illness. The virus doesn't cause much of an infection. It's not very virulent, doesn't create much of a problem in the body. Doing gain-of-function research takes the benign virus and does something to it to make it more virulent, to make it more infectious, to make people get sick more from it. And I really want to reiterate, he wasn't doing gain-of-function research on any virus. He was doing gain-of-function research on coronavirus. And then Bill Gates and Johns Hopkins University prepared a simulation pandemic in New York City in October of 2019 in the event of a pandemic, but not just on any virus, specifically coronavirus. And then, miraculously, we have an outbreak of a coronavirus. And then on top of that, it's giving people symptoms that are not anywhere near consistent with the way viruses behave in the body. And then you have Anthony Fauci in January of 2017 saying to Georgetown University at a dinner that there will be a surprise outbreak during the Trump administration.
It will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
Now, I'm sorry, a surprise outbreak is no longer a surprise. It actually sounds like it's a plan. What is a medical doctor or a scientist or even a layperson supposed to do when we see that the illness that people are getting with COVID-19 is supposed to be a coronavirus infection, and yet it's not even close to being consistent with the way coronavirus operates in the body? What is a medical doctor or a scientist or a layperson supposed to do when he or she finds out that Anthony Fauci is quoted in January of 2017 at a Georgetown University dinner as saying there will be a surprise outbreak during the Trump administration? Every time these questions have been raised, people have been censored. When we've talked about the use of 2 anti-parasite drugs effectively helping as a treatment for people who got sick early on and they got better really quickly, why is that information censored? Why are the questions that I asked censored? It makes us wonder if dissenting opinion is no longer welcome in society. And then one has to wonder, well, what kind of society are we living in where a give and take of different ideas or dissenting ideas and opinions are not welcome in the mainstream media?
Well, to me, it sounds like we're living in a pretty dark society. So my next question for you, Larry, is what can we do about it? And do you have any advice of how to make a positive change moving forward?
One of the things that I think is needed in our society, at this time on this planet, on this earth right now, is for people to keep an open mind, to critically think, and to not be convinced of how certain they are about the information that they've been given. In my understanding of knowledge, there are 3 ways of knowing things. 1 is intuition. 2 is through what people tell you is true. And 3, by you discovering the truth and knowledge on your own, through your own research and through your own experience. We are losing 1 and 3. We are losing our ability to use our intuition, and we are losing our ability to critically think, to discover answers, and to do our own research and have our own experiences. And we are watching a society and a world where the only thing that we know to be true is what our authorities tell us to be true. And so we are externalizing our authority, we are externalizing our power, and we're giving it up to false gods and false prophets who we are trusting to guide us and take care of us properly. But the information doesn't seem consistent with being able to trust all of what they're saying. And so I am asking people to give up their certainty, to be okay with doubt, to be okay with unknown, to be willing to learn things that are either new for them or opposite to what they thought they knew. But don't learn it because I, as an expert, might say it to you. Learn it because you thought it through, because you discussed it, because you worked it through, because you tried to look at things from all angles, and you were willing to be wrong and willing to grow into greater information and greater truth than what was handed to you by the authorities to whom you gave your power.
Beautiful, beautiful message. Larry, Dr. Pilevsky, thank you so much for the time that you've taken to share this truth with us. Thank you for the advice. Thank you for the knowledge. Thank you for the wisdom. And thank you for being such an incredible human being that this world really, really needs. Thank you. For us to make a change for the better in this world, we have to begin with one very simple step. And that step is to take responsibility for our actions. Let's ask ourselves, why does our world look the way that it looks today? And it's very easy to blame the few that control the many. But we, the people, the many, are missing one very important thing. The few that control the many have not taken our power. Like Larry said, we gave them our power. The only reason our world looks the way that it looks today is because we, the people, allowed it to look like that. And just like we, the people, caused this, we, the people, are going to fix this. The first step is we take responsibility for our actions, and we, the people who hold the true power, put an end to this, not with hate or war or violence, but with light and peace and love. We must come together. We must unite. We must lose our victim mentality because there's nobody to blame but ourselves. It's time for us to open our eyes. It's time for us to become aware, to become conscious, to take our power back peacefully, to make our world the world that we deserve to live in, a world of love, a world of light, and a world of peace. So thank you all for listening to this video. I urge you all to share it because it's the only way that we're going to get the truth out. Even if it's censored, share it and keep sharing it. Share it with the world, with your loved ones, with your family. And continue spreading awareness. Continue educating yourself and others. And together, let's raise our collective vibration. Not to one of fear, but to one of love. Thank you.